History is all around us. There are secrets of our past around every corner, hidden in our street names, buried under our feet. And in this series, I'm going to be uncovering these secrets by exploring Britain's most historic towns. This is the original Roman. And I want to discover which towns across the UK can claim to reveal the most about each period in British history. I'll be deciphering clues in familiar landscapes, bringing lost landmarks back to life, and peeling away the layers to reveal a unique view of these towns in all their former glory. Oh, look at this, look at this! From the Vikings to the Victorians, the Romans to the Tudors, I'll reveal the story of an era through the story of a single town. This week, I'm skipping back in time to the Regency period, a time of great social and economic change when appearance was everything. I'm heading to a place which would become, for a brief and magnificent moment, the party capital of Britain. Somewhere to show off your status and wealth. It is terrifying. A place with sought-after healing waters and peculiar ideas for a good afternoon out. You could have a bath, have a swim, have a saline enema and go home with a biscuit. If you want to understand the Regency period, then the best place to be is Cheltenham. 100 miles west of London, nestled at the foot of the Cotswold Hills, lies the town of Cheltenham. Today it's known for its enormous racecourse and its festivals, from music to literature to science. In 2015, it topped a poll as the best place to raise a family. Cheltenham is a town of elegance, pleasure, and a strong sporting culture. But none of this would be true today if it wasn't for the Regency era. The Regency strictly lasted from 1811 to 1820, when the wild Prince Regent reigned on behalf of his ailing father, King George III. But the term Regency era is often used more widely to encompass the first few decades of the 19th century. It was a time which saw the publication of Jane Austen's masterpiece, and Britain fighting in the Napoleonic Wars in France and over territory in America. Poverty was rife in this era, with tens of thousands confined to workhouses. But it also saw the expansion of the middle classes, people with time and money to spend. With wars raging abroad, the wealthy were choosing to travel within Britain, and one type of destination became very popular: the spa town. This Lido was built in the 1930s, so a full century after the period that I've come here to investigate. But it sums up what Regency Cheltenham is all about: health, recreation, and water. By the Regency period, over 100 spas had sprung up across Britain, each one claiming that its waters had the most amazing healing properties. But it wasn't all about health. The waters proved such an attraction that Cheltenham became the place to be seen and to socialise, and an entire town grew up to satisfy the demands and desires of the well-to-do. Well, I want to understand how Cheltenham achieved this almost legendary status. But first of all, I've got a party to go to. If you had a lot of time and money to spend in Regency Britain, you would come to a spa town for the season. And no stay during the Cheltenham season would have been complete without a visit to the Pittville Pump Room. feeling like I'm just looking a bit too 21st century, so I'm going to go and get into something a bit more Regency. I've never had my hair in ringlets before, but this was the height of sophisticated fashion in Regency Britain.
So I'd say that we're all done there. If you want to take a look
Do you think so? Yeah?
Okay, yeah.
This is fantastic. Great hair. Before I get thrown in at the deep end, I'd like some advice on how to party like it's 1818. So I'm meeting Regency expert Elaine Challis, both of us in our best period attire.
Elaine.
Do we shake hands or do we just curtsy?
Well, we probably would have curtsied.
Curtsy, okay. So I actually don't recognise myself.
Cheltenham drew all kinds of people. This is a very popular spa town. So you get people, Jane Austen comes at one point, Byron is here. One of the great ones is the Duke of Wellington, the man of the moment.
The Cheltenham season ran from June to October. Some visitors would stay for the entire season.
And so you'll have a whole series of events. There'll be concerts, there'll be lectures, and there'll be subscription balls that will happen once a week. There was both the elite activities, like the balls, and things that were really popular. So for instance, if you wanted to see a man take a bet to eat 80 pies in an hour, you could come to Cheltenham in the 18 teens and find that.
To help me get in the mood for the ball, Elaine has brought along an original Cheltenham accessory, essential for any Regency party girl. That's a beautiful fan. The inlay here, that's absolutely gorgeous.
Absolutely beautiful. They were something that all women carried. If you think of women carrying their purses today, this is sort of pre-purse. It was part of sort of every woman's kit. The practical use for a fan is to keep you cool. However, they were also really good for flirting.
So how do you flirt with a fan?
You've got something you can open and shut, you can put to your cheek, you can put to your heart, and drop and have a young man come and pick it up for you. There's all kinds of things to do with a fan.
And what about manners, Elaine? We're here at the ball. What are the do's and don'ts?
Well, it's a tricky balance for a young woman to manage because she needs to look modest, but she also needs to make sure that she looks accessible and not rigid. One thing you really, really don't want to do is you don't want to be noisy, you laugh too loudly. There's a boundary and you have to be careful.
That sounds terrifying.
Well, the thing is, of course, that everyone's going to be watching.
Alice, would you care to dance?
I'm not sure if I have a choice. Here goes.
If you look at me and honour your partners, everybody.
I have to admit, I did have a little practice earlier. If you were young and single, this was the ideal place to meet future marriage partners. But even married women like me would get the opportunity to show off their moves. I haven't quite broken into a glow, but it's quite hard work and it's really good fun. I like that. Should we do it again?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Despite all the glamour and parties, what first drew the crowds to Regency spa towns like Cheltenham was simple mineral water. The Pitville Pump Room is the only place in Cheltenham where you can still sample this great elixir. Once the party's over, I'm meeting Fiona Clark to see what all the fuss is about.
So this is where the water comes out of this tap.
Yeah. And this is coming
This is coming straight out of the ground.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. It smells a bit.
It does. The smellier and the dirtier the water, the more people thought that it was actually doing them some good.
So what did people believe was good about this water? What were the benefits
Well, this
of it?
particular one, it cured everything. So gout, heart problems, rheumatism, bowel problems. So this one is a purgative. So if you're constipated, it's quite effective, apparently.
Yeah.
Bowel, kidneys, liver, heart. I mean, what else is there?
Well, while the Cheltenham waters have a high mineral content, there's no evidence they actually have any healing properties.
Right, we've got to do it, haven't we?
We do.
Bottoms up.
Bottoms up.
Gosh, that's quite strange, isn't
It
it?
is quite strange.
It tastes soapy.
It's
It really
right.
does.
Yes, it
Yeah.
does. And if you think that you might have had to drink 1 pint of that before breakfast...
A pint?
A pint.
I'm definitely not drinking a pint. The hairstyles and the dancing I'd happily adopt, but I think I'll stick to 21st century beverages.
I've come up onto the roof terrace for a bit of fresh air, but also looking out at this wonderful view. This is Pittville Park, which was designed at the same time as the pump room itself and is open to the general public today. But back in the day, it was for the exclusive use of local residents and the guests of the pump room. And I got this rather wonderful drawing of Cheltenham in the 1830s from this particular vantage point. So it was drawn up here, looking out over Pittville Park, where we can see people enjoying themselves. And then in the distance, we get this fantastic view of Regency Cheltenham at its peak. But what's really surprising is that just 40 years before this pump room was built, Cheltenham as we know it didn't exist. And this view would have mostly been countryside.
By stripping away the Regency buildings, we can see for the first time in over 200 years what this landscape would have looked like. For centuries, Cheltenham is just a quiet country market town. A few buildings huddled in the midst of the Gloucestershire countryside. Other British spa towns spring up and prosper, while Cheltenham remains unnoticed and untouched. If you want to find out about Regency Britain, then Cheltenham is the place to be. I've partied at a Regency ball, but to really understand the era and how Cheltenham was transformed, I need to turn the clocks back another 100 years, to Georgian times. The big craze that would define Regency Cheltenham is said to have started, so the story goes, with a few feathered friends. If you look closely enough, all over Cheltenham, on gateposts, street signs, and even on its coat of arms, you see pigeons. These particular pigeons are not in their original position. Today they guard a country lane just outside the town, but they used to stand at the entrance to the very first spring to be discovered in Cheltenham, on a farm.
So the story goes that in 1716, local landowner William Mason discovered a group of particularly healthy-looking pigeons pecking at salts that were deposited around a spring on his land. And he started to wonder if those waters could be beneficial for humans too.
But Mason's farm was far from the centre of Cheltenham, out of town in the countryside, and a muddy field wasn't the ideal spot to attract crowds of tourists. Cheltenham's now much bigger. This is the site of Mason's Well today.
I'd love to show you Mason's Well, but I can't because it's underneath that Cheltenham Ladies' College. And we're right in the centre of Cheltenham here, but 300 years ago, this would all have been fields. And actually, it would have stayed that way had it not been for Mason's son-in-law, Henry Skillicorn.
In the 18th century, Britain was trading with countries across the world, and well-travelled merchants returned having made their fortunes, looking for investments closer to home. One of these was Henry Skillicorn. We know rather a lot about his life, thanks to a very, very, very long inscription, as local historian James Hodston is keen to show me.
Here on the wall in front of you is the only 595-word memorial inscription in England.
So does that make it the longest inscription?
We believe so, and it covers his whole life from birth on the Isle of Man in 1678, came down to Bristol, worked his way up to be lieutenant of a trading galley, and then was captain by 1719.
It tells us all about his voyages. It says he visited most of the great trading ports of the Mediterranean, up the archipelago, Morea and Turkey, Spain, Portugal and Venice, and could do business in 7 tongues.
But after all that travelling, Skillicorn saw an opportunity to make some money back home.
He could see that this rather struggling small spar in a muddy field, half a mile away from the middle of town, needed to be taken in hand. He brought a bit of experience and some vision. It wasn't about selling water at a penny a glass. It was about a visitor experience. So the way to do that was to lay out a nice walk, which made it a pleasant experience to get up to the spa and back again.
All traces of Skillicorn's walk have now vanished. But by using descriptions and drawings from the time, we can recreate what would go on to become one of the biggest tourist attractions of Regency Britain. Built in 1739, the Well Walk stretches for half a mile from the centre of Cheltenham to the site of the spring itself. With a gravel path to protect their shoes, health tourists could cross the pretty bridge over the River Chelt and then stroll along an avenue of elms before finally arriving at the well. This is just the start of the reinvention of Cheltenham as a beautifully designed holiday destination. But 300 years on, I was rather surprised to bump into the designer of the Well Walk himself.
Pleased to make your acquaintance.
Yes, Captain Henry Skillicorn.
You're Skillicorn.
I am, yes, yes.
This is all your fault.
It is, yes. Cheltenham wouldn't be what it is today without me. Yes, I put it on the map. I created the first spa here in Cheltenham, and it made Cheltenham very, very popular indeed.
And made you quite rich.
Made me very, very rich, actually, yes.
Absolutely wonderful to meet you. I'll shake your hand.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Skillicorn had turned Cheltenham into a tourist destination, but it still remained a relatively quiet country town. What it needed now was a bit of celebrity endorsement. And that arrived in 1788 when George III came to town. His visit was captured by a group of cartoonists, the paparazzi of the day. I've come to the Wilson Museum to have a good gawp with the local author Steve Blake.
Hello, Steve.
Hi, Alice. Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
You've got some prints there
I've
for me,
got
which is
some
really
Cheltenham
exciting.
prints, yeah, for you to look at. My favourite is this one, which is
Is that the king?
it's the King. Yeah, it was published by a
hilarious.
chap called Samuel Fors, who was based in London. Actually, within a fortnight or so of George arriving, we have King George guzzling the Cheltenham waters from
not just taking a
pump.
glass of it, but mouth open, water's
Absolutely.
pouring in.
And there's poor Queen Charlotte sort of saying, pulling on his coattails, and the two of the daughters are saying, "My papa will leave none for us."
But George had a good reason for guzzling all this water. He was hoping it would cure him of an illness that would plague him for the rest of his life.
George had what he describes as a pretty smart bilious attack in the spring of 1788, and that's why he came to Cheltenham.
What is a bilious attack? Indigestion?
Sickness, yes, he was sick. It was the beginning of his illness, actually.
So did the Cheltenham waters help George III with his biliousness?
Well, it's difficult to say, of course, because the illness he had, which is generally now regarded as a liver complaint called porphyria, it actually got worse, of course. He actually did quite well. He seemed fine when he was here, and he was fine for a while, but then, of course, he fell ill towards the end of 1788.
And it was this illness that would eventually usher in the Regency era, with his son, the Prince Regent, reigning on his behalf. But for now, King George's visit to Cheltenham was enough to make its waters the most desirable remedy in Britain.
So was this really what started things off for Regency Cheltenham?
It had obviously been a spa for sort of a couple of generations, but it really was George Cumming that put it on the map.
Yeah.
You know, people actually woke up to the fact that it was there and that it was somewhere perhaps they ought to go as well.
Cheltenham was now all set to become the holiday capital of Regency Britain. But there was one thing keeping back the crowds. It was very hard to reach. This was an era before the railways, and many roads were little more than potholed, muddy tracks. The journey from London to Cheltenham would have taken up to 3 days. With the fashionable elite keen to holiday in Cheltenham, the townspeople set about making it more accessible. The best way to see evidence of this is from the air. Aerial archaeologist Ben Robinson has been exploring the landscape around Cheltenham.
We're just looking around now for a relic of Cheltenham's past, an attempt to get Cheltenham better connected. It's the Coombe Hill Canal, and it should be around here somewhere. There we go. I can see it running off in the distance. It's attached to the Severn and it heads off towards Cheltenham. It was constructed at the end of the 18th century when Cheltenham was starting to boom, and visitors to the place had to bring all their own provisions, including coal. The canal was an attempt to get all these provisions down the Severn and into the town. But a combination of terrain and a lack of funds meant that it never really worked. It just stops about 5 miles from Cheltenham in the middle of open countryside. Basically, it was a failure.
Fortunately, efforts to improve road travel were slightly more successful. By the beginning of the Regency era, a network of turnpike toll roads had been set up across the country.
This is the busy A40, the London Road, and this was a toll road. This meant that the trustees could raise money to maintain the road, making travel quicker and safer.
I'm in Cheltenham, the perfect place to find out about Regency Britain. A visit from George III made Cheltenham Spa the place to be. And by the 1800s, with roads now improved, the rich were arriving here in their thousands. Local property developers were quick to capitalise. And fortunately for Cheltenham, this happened to be one of the most elegant periods in British architecture. It's the buildings of this period which still typify the town today. If we take away the cars and the double yellow lines, we could almost be back in 1812.
A famous printmaker wrote, a visitor would imagine on reviewing the town that it had arisen in a single night from some fairy's magic influence. And I can completely understand what he meant. First of all, Cheltenham sprang up so quickly, but also on a deserted morning like this, it has this beautiful, ethereal quality.
Architecture in Regency Britain took its inspiration from the classical Greek and Roman worlds. Architect John Buonarroti Papworth was one who brought these neoclassical ideas to the Montpellier area of Cheltenham. Refined simplicity was the order of the day, with clean lines, symmetry, long terraces, and sweeping crescents.
I really love the architecture of this period, and it's not just about the big civic buildings, it's also about houses. So what we're looking at here are terraced townhouses, but they're forming a crescent, and there's a wonderful consistency to it. And there's all these elements of the neoclassical that draw on ancient Greece and Rome. Just look at those lovely Doric columns there holding up the porticos. Now, when the neoclassical starts in Britain, it's quite austere and plain, but by the time we get to the Regency period, you're allowed to have a bit of fun with it. Look at those balconies, they're fantastic.
The Regency style can also be found in the layout of the town. And from the air today, we can see how leisure and entertainment permeated the plan of Cheltenham, as Ben Robinson is finding out.
Got a really nice view of Cheltenham Racecourse here. Every self-respecting Regency town had to have a horse racing course. It's a site of great entertainment and drama. And of course it still is, the Cheltenham Festival. Another feature of the Regency town that's really obvious from the sky are these straight lines, these tree-lined avenues, walks or promenades. I think of promenades as being something to do with the seaside usually, but it's actually these inland spa towns that had them first. The idea was it was for the well-to-do to show off, take the air, bump into people, casual acquaintances, all that kind of stuff. It was a meeting place, a place to see and be seen.
In Regency times, these promenades were the place to stroll. But if you were really posh, you wouldn't risk getting your feet dirty.
This is the promenade, and as its name suggests, most people would have walked up and down here, but I'm opting for a more elite form of transport. Right, how do I get in? Thank you. The sedan chair. I'm mildly terrified about this. It is terrifying. Yeah, it's kind of bouncy though. It's a bit like riding a camel. So apparently the whole point of travelling in a sedan chair is that I don't have to set foot outside. So I'm going to be carried right into what is now a bookshop, but what was the Imperial Hotel. Breathe in, breathe in.
Joining me for some promenade watching is David McKinstry, an expert on Regency etiquette.
Hello, David.
Hello, Alice.
Hello. I've just arrived by sedan chair on the promenade.
Oh, wonderful. Did you enjoy that experience?
I did. There was something rather glorious about it.
Yeah.
So, who would have been out promenading up and down here?
You'd be looking at largely the gentry, people with small country estates. We tend to think of promenading as probably a little bit strange, that you get dressed up in your best clothes and walk up and down the street for 45 minutes every day.
Is that literally what it was?
It was essentially
You're not really
that.
going from A to B, you're just out to be seen.
You're just out to be seen, to catch up on the gossip, to see who else is in town, just a sort of social experience. They were very keen to protect that environment for themselves, so they didn't want any interference from beggars and vagrants and anyone they saw as undesirable. So in 1824, you have the introduction of the Vagrancy Act. The real purpose of it is to enable vagrants to be removed while the middle classes enjoyed the boulevards or the parks.
The Vagrancy Act may have made certain areas of town safer for the well-heeled to stroll in, but it also protected the deep divisions in Regency society. For the well-to-do, associating with the poor was not the done thing. It was the wealthy one wanted to get to know.
What about paying visits to people? What was the etiquette there?
Well, there was a very codified form of etiquette for visiting.
So you can't just go around and introduce yourself and go, hello.
No, I mean, you can turn up on the doorstep, but there's a certain way you have to do it.
Right.
So you go to wherever they're staying, leave your card, potentially leave your husband's card.
Yeah.
Maybe the card of a grown-up son as well.
Yeah.
And that was it. You went away and you waited. And if the people you had left your cards with hadn't reciprocated that process within 7 to 10 days, then they weren't interested in making your acquaintance and you'd effectively been cut dead. So it was quite a brutal process.
So in that 7 to 10 days, they're going to find out more about me. They don't have Google. How are they going to do that?
They're asking people they know what you're like. They're potentially sending their servants to go and see what your servants are like and get the gossip. So this is sort of research process. And if someone says, oh yes, she's, her husband's got 10,000 a year, then suddenly you might be interested in visiting her. If they say, oh, they're as poor as church mice and don't really know anyone, then the call probably wouldn't be returned.
So what can I do to make myself thoroughly unpalatable as an acquaintance and exclude myself from polite society?
You would have to commit some relatively significant misdemeanor or scandal. So that could be failure to pay your debts, even resulting in bankruptcy, which was seen as the ultimate disgrace in that period. So bankruptcy would see you banned from court, you were banned from the races, you were banned from all sorts of social activities. A financial disgrace was in some ways far more serious in polite society than a sexual disgrace. If you were rich enough, you could get away with quite a lot of things.
Wealth was everything in Regency Britain. And if you had money, there was yet more to be made by cashing in on the big craze of the day.
Today, this building is known as the Rotunda, but when it was built, it was the Montpellier Spa, and it was just one of many spas to pop up in Regency Cheltenham. It was built by the entrepreneur Henry Thompson, and he wasn't content for people to simply come here and sip the water. Oh no, he had far grander plans.
Thompson pumped the water from his spa to a manufacturing site where he heated it to extract the salts to bottle and sell around the world. But he didn't stop there. In true entrepreneurial style, he'd spotted an opportunity in the knock-on effects of the process.
Just over the road there is the Cheltenham Playhouse, but it wasn't always a theatre, and I'm told that hidden away deep inside the building, there's evidence of its former use. Apparently.
Alan Miller is the theatre historian.
Alan.
Hello.
Hello.
Welcome to the Playhouse. Nice to see you. This is our little theatre.
Yeah, but it wasn't always a theatre.
No, it wasn't always a theatre. Indeed, it's had a number of other uses over its time.
Yeah.
And if you'd like to see one of the features that we've got,
yeah,
that way.
Very mysterious.
There you are. It's a store for our theatre furniture now, but please go on down.
OK. Oh, this is great. Old gramophones, big griffin.
But what about the room itself?
Plenty of chairs. Oh. Is it tiled?
Yes, it is.
Oh. Are we in a swimming bath?
We are in a swimming bath. Yes.
And this is the shallow end?
This is the shallow end.
And this is the deep end?
That is the deep end.
Brilliant. Can I get up through that hatch? I'm on the stage. That's so bizarre. Right, back down.
In a former life, this theatre went by the name of the Montpellier Baths. Not a place for swimming so much, but for washing. Henry Thompson used the heat left after evaporating the salts from his spring water to warm up the water for the baths.
So it must have been quite unusual then for people to be able to come somewhere and have a hot bath?
People didn't have private bathrooms, so coming to an establishment like this was the way of getting a bath.
Even the hero of the Battle of Waterloo didn't have his own tub.
Indeed, our most famous visitor is the Duke of Wellington.
Right.
Who came here in 1827. He came here every day on a fortnight holiday at 4 o'clock in the afternoon with a bundle of newspapers under his arm, and they provided him here with a hot bath and a wooden rack, so he could lounge in his bath and read his newspapers supported by a wooden rack.
Doesn't work so well with a Kindle.
No, it doesn't either, and I suspect the newspapers got a bit soggy as well.
And were there any other kinds of treatments on offer here?
Yes, there were various other medicinal treatments, of which self-administered enema is one of our favourites.
Oh, delightful.
Yeah, absolutely.
The tiles and steps here today are in fact remnants of a pool built after the Regency era. And there are no pictures of the original baths built in 1809. But by using surviving plans and descriptions, we're able to see for the first time what they would have looked like. 6 small baths are built to cater for visitors wishing to cleanse themselves. The baths are plain and white, but each one has its own brightly coloured dressing room. The boiler supplying the building is the largest in the country. In fact, there's so much heat produced that there's still some left over, and in 1836, a bakery is added.
I mean, that's a brilliant afternoon out. You could come here, have a bath, have a swim, have a saline enema and go home with a biscuit.
Or a loaf of bread, yes, absolutely.
But all these facilities were only available if you were wealthy and male. Women were not entitled to such luxuries. I'm exploring the story of Regency Britain, and what better place to be than Cheltenham? It was a town for people with money and time to spend it. And Cheltenham was particularly quick off the mark in capitalising on a new craze: shopping.
Well, this is Montpellier Arcade, which was built in 1832, and believe it or not, this is one of Britain's first purpose-built shopping arcades. It is a little on the shabby side today, but you can still get a feeling of that Regency splendour. And that, apparently, is the original glass ceiling up there. It's quite compact and bijou. There were 16 shops crammed in here, ranging from a clothier to a chemist, a pastry cook, a jeweller, an artist repository, and Mr. Brown's coffee and cigar shop.
Coffee shops in Regency Britain were not the salubrious places they are today, but low-life haunts full of sleaze and crime. I'm venturing into a modern-day one with Regency expert Kirsty Hartziotis.
Hello, pleased to meet you. I'm Kirsty.
But my choice of drinks back then would have been surprisingly limited.
So what have we got here then, Kirsty?
We've got 3 different kinds of ware for 3 different drinks. So starting with coffee, we've got a coffee can. This beautifully painted one which has a picture of the Well Walk. When coffee was first introduced, it was very much a male preserve. Back in the Regency times, we wouldn't be here.
Oh, really? We wouldn't be allowed to come and drink coffee in a coffee house?
It's not an acceptable thing for a respectable woman to do.
OK, so coffee is off the menu.
And what about that one?
This is a chocolate cup. And chocolate is, it's the luxury drink. It has a connotation of decadence, of licentious behaviour in chocolate houses.
Oh, really?
Absolutely. These were places of betting and a bit of debauchery.
So I guess I wouldn't have been drinking hot chocolate then.
And what about this little cup and saucer on the end? That looks very Chinese.
Tea was the high-class stuff. Very expensive. And
so there was nothing lascivious about tea, ever?
Nothing lascivious about tea. And in fact, in the Regency period, you and I could sit and drink tea, even if we couldn't have chocolate or coffee.
Thank goodness things have moved on a bit.
Yes, indeed.
Kirsty and I are about to do something no Regency woman of good reputation would do, and drink some hot chocolate in public.
I can see star anise floating in that.
It's been made from an original Regency recipe, which includes a range of spices, but no sugar.
It smells very spicy.
It smells lovely. I really like it.
It's really good. It makes the
fantastic.
tongue tingle.
I've partied. I've promenaded. I've tasted the waters. And I've seen the restrictions of society. But there was one activity which was open to all, rich and poor, men and women. No Regency holiday would be complete without a trip to the theatre.
If you wanted a good night out in Cheltenham in the Regency period, you probably would have gone to the Theatre Royal, but it burnt down in 1839, so I've come to the Everyman to find out about Regency Theatre. We're about to walk out on stage.
David Francis Taylor has been researching what passed for entertainment at this time.
So this is a bit later, isn't it, than the Regency period?
This is later, but there are still similarities. You have what were this area here, which we now call the stalls. That would have been called the pit.
Right.
And you wouldn't have these seats. You would have had benches. Then you'd have at your top your gallery. That would be where the cheapest seats were. And what's missing here would have been a whole row of boxes all the way around this middle section.
Oh, really?
The most expensive seats. And those boxes would have come all the way onto the stage, so you would have had stage boxes.
So why the boxes going all around?
It's because they want to be seen. And that's really what you were paying for. You were paying to display yourself.
And they would be seen, would they? You know, 'cause the lights go down and you can't see anybody, really.
The lights did not go down. As with any other theatre in Regency England, you would have a lit auditorium.
So that's the kind of layout of the theatre, the audience, the lighting, but what were they actually watching?
Well, I have some examples of some playbills that will give you a much better indication of that. These are all original, so they all date from roughly 1810, 1811. So if you went to the theatre in the Regency period, you wouldn't just go to see one play, as we do now. You would go to see a whole night of entertainment. We have A Cure for the Heartache. That's a comedy in 5 acts. And then that was followed by this song. And then we have one of the most popular pantomimes of the Regency period, which is Harlequin and Mother Goose.
I've seen Mother Goose as a pantomime,
Right.
but it certainly didn't have Harlequin in it.
Harlequin was a favourite Regency character who came originally from Italian comedy and popped up, turning a normal play into a frantic comedy caper.
And Harlequin carried with him a magic sword, and that allowed him to change the objects or the scenes around him. So with a tap of his sword, he could transform people, he could transform the scene. So I actually have something to show you.
What is it? It looks like a cricket bat.
This is a replica of what Harlequin's sword would have looked like in the
But it's
Regency
nothing
era.
like a sword.
Yes, but if I slap this against my leg, it makes a loud noise.
It does sound like you've slapped somebody very hard or hit something very hard.
This is in fact a slapstick.
See, I had no idea where the phrase slapstick comedy came from.
Exactly, this is where it comes from.
Yeah.
This is physical comedy.
Go on, let's have a go. Ow!
It makes a...
That actually hurts.
Yeah, I should have warned you.
All right, okay, I know what I'm going to do. So if you stand there, David,
Okay.
don't move, don't move. Very important you don't move. Ready?
Ready?
And that is proper slapstick.
Well, now for my trick then.
Okay.
Okay, are you ready?
Is it going to be even more spectacular?
I hope so. Certainly more transformative.
Go on then.
Here we go. Now that's Harlequin magic. That's how he used his sword to change the scene.
Fantastic.
A miraculous transformation had occurred in Cheltenham itself. In a few short years, it had grown from a country market town to the buzzing centre of polite society. But its heyday would be short-lived. With the end of the Regency era came the end of the spa town craze. As the Victorian period approached, the crowd stopped coming to Cheltenham. Some developers were slow to notice. One of these was Joseph Pitt, the man behind the magnificent Pittville Pump Room. He dreamt that his estate of Pittville, a mile from the centre of Cheltenham today, would become a rival town in its own right. But it never happened.
Joseph Pitt planned out a whole series of elegant streets, squares and crescents, and they're still grand today and very sought-after places to live. But actually, he didn't see very much of it through to completion. By 1830, only 19 of some 500 planned houses had been built. Money was running through his fingers like water. He lost his fortune, and with it, his respectability, and ended his life heavily in debt.
Within just a few years of his famous pump room opening, spas had lost their lustre.
By the beginning of the Victorian period, people were becoming perhaps a little sceptical about the health-giving properties of mineral water, and they were heading to the coast instead. Seaside resorts, not spa towns, were drawing the crowds. It was the end of an era.
The Regency period has receded into the past, but there is much that is still with us today.
The architecture around the centre of Cheltenham is much more than just a relic of the past. It gives the modern town its character. And look at this, we can see people enjoying the parks and the promenades just as they did in Regency times. Although, of course, now these parks are open to the general public. And the coffee houses, swimming pools and bars of Cheltenham are frequented by women as well as men.
In the space of just a few years, Cheltenham has grown from a remote market town to a countryside spa resort favoured by royalty, and then into a fashionable holiday destination complete with innovative bathhouses and stunning Regency architecture. For me, it's the best bits of the era that have survived.
The spirit of Regency Cheltenham is still alive.